Welcome to an off-grid life. Hi, my name is Debbie, and this is the third in a series of talks on the environment. The first one was climate change and how we're insulated. Second one was fossil fuels 101. This one is on resource depletion. And you might think, well, what's being depleted? Here in the United States, when you go into the store, the shelves are stocked. Gas prices are low, so what could we be worried about? But it's behind the scenes stuff that we really need to, find out about, that there are issues that are happening because we live on a finite planet and things are going to run out. So before I start, I'd like to go over a couple terms, and that would be carrying capacity and sustainability. Carrying capacity is the ability of an ecosystem to supply the plants and animals and insects in that system with enough resources to sustain life in food and water and whatever else they need, habitat. And this is an example of how carrying capacity would not work. If you put 100 deer on an acre of land, there wouldn't be enough food for them to sustain life. If you put 100 people on an acre of land and you told them they couldn't go to the grocery store and they had to grow their own food, get their own water from there, if they needed heat, they'd have to have enough trees to supply firewood, and then they have to deal with their waste. So they wouldn't make it either. Let's look at the whole planet. Now, the planet is really big, but there's a lot of water on there, and we have 7.6 billion people. We need enough water, fresh water to drink, and enough land to grow food to feed all of us, plus all the other things we're making, or maybe we shouldn't be making. And so that is an example of what carrying capacity is. And it's good to know those things because while we're going to the store, what's carrying capacity? It's essential. Sustainability is the ability of the planet or a resource to replenish itself. Like, okay, let's look at fossil fuels. They take thousands of years to create, and if we're going to wait for more fossil fuels, we're going to run out and we're going to be out of luck because we can't wait 1,000 years. Somebody else will use them. But let's look at a pond, or no, a lake. And it's a small lake, and it's stocked with fish, and everybody has a limit of how much they can take out, how much they can fish out of there. The fish have a way to replenish themselves because there's a limit. So there's always fish in there. And so, in time for because they're having babies. That's an example of a sustainable practice, or a sustainable practice. Anyway, the three things I'm going to go over that are running out are oil, soil, and water. And those three, all of them, are critical for life on the planet. Even though we might think iPhones and all that other stuff are critical, we can't live without these three. And let's talk about oil first. And in the class I took, that was 9 years ago, so I thought I would look up a couple little articles to see if we're on, things have changed, see if things have changed. So Mark Lolanella wrote an article in February 11th of 2015 in Live Science called Peak Oil, Theory or Myth. Peak oil, the term has been around, but nobody seems to agree on it. There are people that are right on board with it, and there's other people that are like, no, forget it, it doesn't exist. It's hard to determine as geologists to find out how much oil there is exactly in reserves. So that's one of the problems. Anyway, M. King Harbert in 1956, he worked for Shell Oil Company as a geologist, and he predicted that the U.S. would reach peak oil in 1970, which it did. And peak oil is the halfway reserves of oil. And if it took 50 years to reach the halfway point, it would be less time because we have more people, more cars, and now we're using oil to make plastic. And there are emerging markets like China and India, more people using. So, but anyway, in 1970, the U.S. reached peak oil. Globally, they're speculating that in 2005, peak oil globally happened, or in 2010. But again, it's hard to know how much oil is in reserves. So there are also, and there are some other issues. So there's conventional oil, and now there's non-conventional oil, and that's what's kind of moved peak oil down the road a bit. The Bakken oil field in the U.S. happened in the late 1990s, maybe early 2000s, and a process called fracking, which is a horrific practice, allowed them to get the oil out of shale, which they could not do previously. So all of a sudden there was an oil boom in the United States. And then there's tar sands oil and oil that comes out of coal, and there's fuels like from plants. And those unconventional oils are harder and more costly to get out of the ground. Conventional oil is cheap and easy, and these other ones not at all. In his article, 80% of the oil in the Gulf of Mexico comes from deep water wells. So it's not so easy to get oil. And take tar sands oil, for instance. It's an unconventional oil, and it's gunk. It's just like you have to take water and chemicals to extract the oil out of that. So it's a costly process. So the other thing is, do we want to, even if we have reserves for 30 years, 100 years, do we want to burn it? And that wasn't brought up in the article, but as I was doing some research on what the current CO2 limit, or the current number of CO2 in the atmosphere is, which is, it's 408, 450 parts per million is considered unsafe. And so if we're at the current level right now, in 14 years, hardly 14 years, we should reach 450. So that's not that much time at all. And anyway, oil will, decline and go away eventually, and we need to prepare for that because the whole world depends on oil. So let's talk about soil. Matt Hansen, he did an article called "America is Running Out of Soil," and that was May 13, 2015 in The Week magazine. And that was pretty much the same information that I learned in the class. There's two issues that are contributing to soil depletion. And soil is not just dirt. We need it to grow food. And monocultures are how we grow food predominantly. A field of 1,000 acres or 500 acres could be corn, wheat. It's only one crop, which creates a problem because now it degrades the soil because we're putting fertilizer and pesticides on the soil. We're putting, we're putting fertilizer on there because the soil doesn't have enough time to regenerate itself because it's not in a natural state. Nature doesn't work this way. Nature is a lot smarter than we are. And we think we have one up on nature, but no, she's going to win. Anyway, and it degrades the soil. The other issue is, and then pesticides are put on there because there's no ecosystem in there. So that bug that's in there doesn't have another plant with another bug on it to get it, so they got to put pesticides on there. The other issue is erosion. And much of the time during the year, the land is exposed. A big field, that has, some crop in there is exposed. So wind and rain and water, that washes away the soil. A top UN authority said that without any changes, we will run out of soil in about 60 years. And this problem is worldwide. And there are solutions to this. That would be cover crops, no-till, But those programs have to be implemented on a wide scale, and that's not happening at this time. Not yet, anyway. Anyway, soil. We're running out of it. Next, water. If you look at, my professor said, we will be, fighting over water before we'll be fighting over oil. And if you look at a map of the whole globe, there are many, many regions and countries that are going through, droughts and scarcity of water. Let's take the United States in our area. The Ogallala Aquifer is, according to Wikipedia, is the largest aquifer in the world. According to Water Encyclopedia and National Geographic, it has the capacity of Lake Huron. So it's big, it's huge. It's in 6 states, from the top of, the bottom of South Dakota, Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. 30% of the irrigation comes from the Ogallala, and it supplies a lot of agriculture. But it's in a semi-arid area, so there is not a lot of rainwater. So for the amount of water we're taking out of it, it's not getting replenished. So this is a big issue. The other thing is, we use water not only to drink or to irrigate, we use it in industrial processes, for all of the food that gets processed. National Geographic had a list of, items and how many gallons it takes of water to process that. So, for instance, a hamburger, 1/3 of a pound, 660 gallons of water. A pound of refined sugar, 198 gallons of water. All of these processes, there's textiles, cotton and paper and fracking. Millions of gallons of water go into fracking a well to get the oil or natural gas out of the shale. So all of these practices take a lot of water, which we're not aware of. When we go into the store, we're not thinking, oh man, if I buy this, that means X amount of water. We're just buying it because we like it. But we need to know this information. There are other things that are in decline as well. Richard Heinberg has a great book called Peak Everything, which goes through other items that are in decline because, we're on a finite planet. And also, if you get a chance, watch End of the Line. It's on overfishing. The way they fish now is an industrialized way of fishing. Big, huge nets that gather lots of other fish in the net that end up dying, or turtles or seabirds or whatever. And so they're using radar because fish are declining or becoming extinct because we're overfishing. They're speculating that by 2048 we will have fished all the fish out of the oceans. National Geographic said 2050, so very much on the same page with that. So we need to know about what's going on, and these things can be overwhelming. Some of them are depressing, but there are solutions. And if we don't know this information, we can't do something about it. And again, the United States consumes the most resources per person of anybody on the planet. And so we can't just hoard all the resources just for us because, people in other countries, they want to live too. And each of these things, if we don't change our lifestyle or the way we do things, we're not going to make it. So we need to know this information in order to make better choices about what we consume. So I invite you to watch more of this information, these videos from this class I took, and I thank you very much for listening to this video. Have a great day.